determine the language that is used throughout all the different books, all the different Sfarim, through the mystical texts, even non-mystical texts. So it's it's big that we're going through it. But I'll say like this. Hold on one second. Hold on, let me show you on this. All right. So one of the big things that we pretty much been learning is this idea of this idea of the four phases, right? And the concept with the four phases again is having is basically four phases of perception, right? But within those four phases of perception, it's also connected to the four worlds. It's also connected to the system of Chokhmah, Bina, Tiferet, and Malchut, these types of things. So all these different frames are in this idea of the four phases. But right now we're dealing with that aspect of perception, right? So we know that you have form and you have substance, you have form of substance, you have abstract form, and then you have essence, right? And so in essence, the way we understand it is that, excuse me, the substance would be, say, the person, the abstract form would be the personality, and the abstract form would be our perception of that reality, and then the essence itself would be the aspect of that person that's concealed that we don't have access to. And so as we learn that the Zohar teaches us in the phases of substance, which is the structure itself, and then two, the light that exists within it, right? And so that's the frame that we're learning from now. So what we're going to do is, hold on. Okay. All right. All right. So we're going to start on. Okay. So it says the aspects of the mineral, vegetable, animal, and speaking beings, which are in the four worlds, and that is the speaking, and that the speaking being is at the center. All right. So we know about this. We know about the different aspects of creation. You have the rock kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom. And it's saying here that that in essence that the human being is at the center of it, right? The speaking. It's interesting to refer to a speaker now. It says ve ata ni order gadir hag she'af al pi hazohar osech. Okay, so it says like this. When he says we now explain the third principle. Although the Zohar although the Zohar deals with each and every world with respect to the Sfirot, which are the divinity and the illumination into what the world, and similarly with all the details, mineral, vegetable, and animals and speaking creatures. He says, which are the created beings in that world. Focused on the Zohar is only the speaking beings of the world. Okay, so let's focus on what was being said. Okay, so we know we have these different kingdoms. So what is it saying here? He says we have now explained the third principles. He says, although the Zohar deals with each and every world with the respect to the Sfirot. Okay. Which are the divinity and illuminates into that the world similarly of all the details. Okay, mineral. Okay, so we know that every world we know, right, all the way from the world of Asilut all the way to the world of Asiya. That within those worlds, there's different levels of those kingdoms, and those different levels of those kingdoms correspond to the five levels of the soul. And those different kingdoms also represent different levels of the soul. And so as we went over the different levels that of learning that we do that affected different aspects of the soul. Right? So he's saying over here, he says the Zohar is only focusing on the world of the speaking creature. Right? So the Zohar is not analyzing the world from the mineral kingdom, from the plant kingdom, from the animal kingdom. It's dealing strictly with the human being, which is the sinner. It says, "Ua mashila lach maha mahavayot mashekha olam hazeh." So he says, and I will share a parable with you involving the entities of this world. It is explained earlier in Had Sefer HaZohar. He said that the four aspects, the mineral kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, animal kingdom, speaking, which are in every world, even in this world, are four parts of the will to receive. So there's different levels of levels of receiving, and each of them also contain within themselves four aspects of the mineral kingdom, whatever. So we say in the world, the lowest world being the world of Asiya, right? We know that there's plant, there's rock, plant, animal, in human in that level of Asiya. But he's saying within each of those worlds, in the world of, say, in the world of Asiya, which is the lowest world, we have those four levels of desire. But within the rock kingdom, saying the lowest part of that kingdom, there's also this aspect of of rock, plant, animal, and human within the aspect of the lowest world within that level of rock, and the same thing by the level of vegetation. And the lowest level of the vegetation, right, would be the dynamic of rock, right, in vegetation. So within that world of rock, in the level of vegetation, there is the four worlds within that, right? So he says, thus a person in his world must receive nourishment and grow from the four aspects of the mineral, vegetable, and animal in the speaking that are in this world. For the person's food also contains these four aspects, which are drawn from the four aspects of the mineral, vegetable, and animal, and speaking that are in the person's body. These are, he wants to receive the indispensable means needed for for sustainability in order to exist, right? So okay, so now he's going even further. Okay, so this wow. Okay. Okay, so he's going deeper. So he's saying that he's explaining what these different levels of desires are, right? This is a very big level. So he's explaining what is rock, vegetation, animal, and speaking. What do they actually mean? What does it mean? I understand that they're different, and he did show us different variables of differences between, the different aspects, the difference between rock, the difference between rock and plant, the difference between plant and animal, and the difference between human. But now he's going even more specific. He says the first level, which I'm assuming he's speaking that this is the rock, right? He wants to receive he wants to receive endlessly the means that are needed for sustainability for his level to exist. That's level A. Level B, he wants more than just he has more of a desire just for the means of indispensable means for his substance, and yearning is for luxury and only is limited to merely, and he said this is only limited to merely animal lust. Okay. So the lowest level of desire is a person who just wants to live. Hey, I just want to live. I don't care. I just want to be able to eat, have shelter. Not die. Right. And so it's like this. So the second level, right? The second level is he wants more. He wants luxury. Right. Right. He's connected to this aspect of an aspect of lust. C, he yearns for human lust, such as honor and power. So this is the fourth level of desire, right? The fourth level of desire is for honor and power, and then the level D, right, is that he yearns for knowledge, right? So that's a very interesting point, right? Because when you look at these different levels of desire, right, you look at the guy or the person who only has a desire just to kind of like have a sustainability. You have the guy who, has his, like, say he has his own business. He maybe makes a little bit more. He employs the guy, right, who just wants to sustain his ability. And And then the guy who's above him wants, like, say, power. Like this guy wants to be in politics, or, or something like this. You know what I mean? He needs to be in a position of honor. He's like a priest or something like this. And then the highest level is just pure knowledge, right? Okay, so we could look at that, and maybe we could look at different phases of our lives and our stages of development. Vahema nishme kima bad cheluki maharatzon lekabel shevu. So, so it says like these are drawn for him through the four parts of the will to receive within him. These his indispensable sustenance is the mineral aspect of his will. Woo, woo. Bro, this is like codes beyond codes. This is unbelievable. So he says the mineral aspect. So when you see people walk, like, back in the day, people, we make jokes, right? So we're not making a joke now, but I want us to remember when we look around the world. So I'm making a joke. So you say, like, the guy who's totally basic, he has a mineral level desire, right? He doesn't care. He is not interested in anything. He wants to have food in his belly, sleep, maybe procreate, and that's it, right? So so this guy who's wanting just the level, he has a mineral level to receive his animal lust, whatever he wants to receive, right? He says their function is only to provide growth and pleasure to his vessel, which is the flesh of his body. His wanting human lust is the animal aspect of his will to receive. As they cause his spirit to expand, he will finally want to he is as his spirit to expand, and finally his wanting knowledge is the aspect of speaking aspect, the will to receive. So let's go over this one more time. Okay. So he says, so these levels are drawn through his level of desire. So he's saying, like, a basic level of desire. He's using two extremes. He's using the extreme of very low level of desire. He says his wanting the indispensable satiation is the mineral aspect of his desire. His wanting animal lust is the vegetable side to his desire, right? So the level higher that is the person who wants the luxury, right? So that person is operating at a vegetative state. He says, as their function is only to provide growth and pleasure for the vessel, which is the flesh. And he says, and he says, he says, their function is only to provide growth and pleasure for his vessel, which is the flesh of the body. His wanting human lust, this is the idea of power influence, is the animal aspect of the will to receive. As they cause his spirit to expand, and finally his wanting knowledge is the speaking aspect. So actually these things are different levels of desire, right? These are the different level um These are the different levels of desire. This is what he's just basically saying. He's saying, like, hey, the aspect of wanting to just live for the sake of living, that's the mineral level. The aspect of wanting luxury is the animal level of plant desire. The aspect of wanting power and honor, that is the aspect of the animal level. And he's saying that the highest level is the desire for knowledge, which is the human speaking level. But he's saying that these levels, the level of honor, power, will ultimately bring a person just to seek truth and knowledge. So all these things are different stages of development. He says utim sa mahabekoni et sheila madat kevimu. So he says like this, and he will find that with regards to the first aspect, which is the indispensable means for his sustenance, in the second aspect, which is the means for his animal lust, that go beyond the measure of his sustenance, which is luxury, he receives the nourishment by things that are lower than him, which are the mineral and vegetable and animal kingdom. However, the third aspect, which is the human desire of power and honor, he receives the nourishment from his own kind, who are equal to him. The fourth aspect of nourishment is knowledge. He receives the nourishment from a loftier aspect of his own kind, that is from the wisdom and intellect themselves, which are spiritual. Okay, so this is big, right? So he's digging in. This is like books upon books upon books, right? So he's saying it like this. So he's saying that he's showing how we shouldn't be looking at ourselves and be like, oh wow, that's a mineral level, right? Because each level builds to the next level. Once we reach that nourishment, it's like a guy who makes $1 million, right? He makes his first $1 million, so he realized I only got $1 million. That's all I have. So now his whole thing is it's like now that he's a quote unquote millionaire, now so he needs more millions, right? Because he only has 1 million. He could go back to his old life, right? So anyway, so he's saying that this aspect of how one level builds to another, right? So the aspect of the mineral level builds as you expand to that level, you build to the luxury level. And as the luxury level, you build to the human desire level, which is the animal level, which is honor and desire. And then from there, you blast off and you receive your nourishment from wisdom and intellect themselves, which are spiritual. He says, so so he says the qualities of the lofty spiritual worlds can be understood in a familiar way. For the worlds are imprinted one after another from above to below. In all aspects of the mineral, vegetable, and animal, in speaking that they are of the lower world of Bria, leave their imprint in the world of Yitzira. The mineral, animal, and speaking of Asya are imprinted from the mineral, vegetable. So in the same way, he's saying the same ways that we see how one desire builds to another desire. He's saying that the spiritual blueprint of reality is that these systems all exist. And so as we climb to higher levels of observance, of understanding, of Kavana, we climb these levels. So he's basically showing us how we climb to level after level after level. Okay. So he says, that the vegetable, animal, in the speaking of Asya are imprinted in the in the in the mineral, vegetable, and speaking of Yitzira. In the minerals, in the minerals, vegetable, and animal, speaking of the world of the imprints, are the imprints from the mineral, vegetable, and animal, in the speaking of Asiya, as explained earlier in the Sulam, Hakdama Sefer Le Zohar. He said the mineral in the spiritual world is referred to as places. Ooh, now he's bringing the codes, because a lot of time we read these sephers and we perceive ourselves, like a lot of people who listen to the shir, they're like, oh yeah, I read this, I read that. But it's like, wait, did you know the codes? Did you? I mean, because you could read it in English or even in Hebrew and like be like, okay, I got this, I got that. But did you really? How did you understand it? What's the tradition of the words, the definitions that you're learning, where they come from? So now we're getting those. This is how lucky we are after Purim. He said the spiritual worlds are referred to. So the spiritual world is referred to as places. The vegetables are called clothing. Okay, so there's the spiritual world. What does this mean? Okay, the minerals in the spiritual world are called places. So if you see places, you can understand what they could be talking about. The vegetable is called clothing. The animal is called angels. Why the speaking of the soul of the people in that while the speaking is the soul of the people in that world, and the 10 spherotes, right, Keter to Malchut, in each of the worlds they are divinity. The soul of man's are at the center of every world, and they are nourished from the whole spiritual reality of that world, just as the physical speaking being is nourished from the entire reality of this world. Be'efon mashek sheva koni ad shehu harishon lekabel la'at. And he says, at the first aspect, which is the will to receive, is indispensable. Needed amount needed for one's sustenance, he will receive the illumination of the places and the clothes that are there. He said the second aspect, which is the animal indulgences, will make the body grow and receive from the angels that are there, which are the spiritual illuminations that go from there. He says, needed for the substance in order to enhance the spiritual vessels, which is the soul is enclosed. Okay, so so these go really, really good, really good. Okay, so let's kind of understand what's going on. Okay, the first aspect, right, which is connected to just the sake to live for the sake of living, which is connected to mineral. Okay, so a person will receive the indispensable amount needed for one substance. He receives from the illumination of places enclosed. So we know places represent this idea of the world of mineral, and the world of clothes represents this idea of vegetation. So he'll receive that substance from those things. He'll receive light based off his efforts for those levels. And he says, and that are, he said, the second aspect, which are the animal indulgences, will that make the body grow. He receives from the angels that are there. Okay, so in this level of this level of animal. Okay, so let's figure this out. Okay, this is work. It's not so easy because we got to make sure we're clear. We can't just go, you know. So he's saying, okay, the first aspect, which is the will to receive the indispensable amount needed for the substance he receives from the illumination of the places and the clothes are there. Okay, fine. The second aspect, which are the animal indulgences. So this is the animal indulgence is the luxury. So he's saying he's holding by the mineral on this first thing. The second aspect, it'll probably make more sense as we go. I mean, I'm not 100% clear. I just want me to go through this. So he says the second aspect, which are the animal indulgences that make his body grow, he receives from the angels that are there, which are the spiritual illumination that goes beyond the amount needed for his substance, in order to enhance the spiritual vessel in which the soul is enclosed. Okay, so what I'm getting at this point, okay, is that at every level, God gives us a certain amount of light. When that level of light starts to overflow, that particular cup being that vessel, you graduate to a higher level in a more expanded vessel, right? And so the more expanded vessel here is not that I just sustaining my needs, but rather even what we call luxury, extended stuff, right? He says one receives that aspect of the second thing that is lower. He says one receives the first aspect and the second aspect from things that are lower than him, which are places and clothes, and angels that are there, as these are lower than than the soul of man. The third aspect, human lust, which enhances a person's spirit, and which he receives in this world of his own kind. All right. Okay, all right. He says, thus one receives the first and the second aspect from things that are lower than him, which are the places enclosed in the angels that are there, and these are lower than him. So, okay, so in a way, what I'm getting saying is that we are holding by the aspect of man, right? The speaking entity. That's who we are, right? But the aspect is that we have to elevate these lower parts of ourselves, right? We have to lower these lower parts of ourselves that are referred to as places, clothes, and angels, things that we're above, right? Things that are lower than the soul of man. He said the third aspect is human lust, which is that idea of honor, which enhances a person's spirit, which he receives in this world from his own kind. He also receives from their own kind. So he's saying those first two aspects, places and clothing, are lower aspects. So there's the vegetation and the rock kingdom, right? And so he's saying that aspect of honor, which is that aspect of the animal level, he said, is us receiving from our fellow man. right? That's us receiving from our fellow man. That's part of this development, right? He receives from his own kind, and he receives from there his own kind, and from all the souls that are found in that world, as it is through them that the illumination of the spirit of the soul is enhanced. The fourth aspect is the will, which is not knowledgeable, right? The highest level. He receives from there the spheros that are in that world. As them, he receives chokmah, bina, dot for his soul. Ha'arei ha'neshamot ha'adam ha'nitzma'at b'kol olam ve'olam sirik. So he says, accordingly, the soul of man, which is found in each and every world, must grow and complete itself from that aspect. So the soul has to grow, and these lights at the different level are that. And so and this is the third aspect mentioned above. We must also know regarding all the statements of the Zohar, every single detail from the lofty worlds it is dealt with, whether the spheroids, the angels, or the clothing, or the places, and even if it discusses them in their own terms, the reader must nevertheless understand that they are stating mainly in reference to the measure that the soul receives from them, and that they're nourished by them. Thus, all of the statements that are found that are focused on that all the statements that are focused that all the statements that are focused on the requirements of the soul. If you comprehend everything along these lines, you will understand and succeed in your undertaking. So he says, okay, so he says the changes stated with regards to the sphere only exist in the relations of Bria, Asya, and Aslut. Okay, so the thing is like this. So he's saying that when you're reading the Zohar and it's talking about the different levels, the different levels of connection, everything is in expression of the human soul and the human soul's development, right? Even if you hear it being talked about, you're not talking about it outside of the frame of substance and form of substance, right? Which is the light, which is the vessel in the light, right? You're not going into other perspectives around it. And so that aspect of vessel and light is being spoke about through the world of the neshama. So like if you could imagine having a world where you are looking at the neshama, looking at the world through your soul, then the information of the Zohar you will see was written only for that aspect of perception, not any of the other things that it's deal with. It's not dealing with the frame of Hakma as it relates to the world. It's not dealing with the world of Asiya as it relates to the world. It's dealing with the world of Asiya, the world of Hakma, the world of rock, animal kingdom from the aspect of the soul. So the Zohar in essence is articulating the soul's relationship with the world around it, let's say the 99% real world around it, in expression through the body, the goof, right? Okay, so this pause here, and we're gonna stop at 22, and then we're gonna just kind of like talk it out. Any thoughts, reflections on this point?
Yeah, well, repercussion. Uh, the way that I'm kind of understanding it is that it is this is describing system of growth and development of the soul itself. But what he's doing is he's teaching us the framework on to when while we're reading, we can identify not only our own personal growth and development where we are, but it's almost like like an evaluation. So like and then also is teaching us to notice and observe uh, perception. So like for example, I like the last part that you just brought up. You know, because we're looking at it's teaching us how the soul is actually observing the world around us through the soul's perception and not through the perception of our eyes or our natural faculties, but rather that of how the soul sees things. So, like for example, if you this is significant because if we learn to do this and we learn how to observe this, we're reading the Torah, we will be in a better equipped place to understand what we're reading and to apply it to our lives. Like, for example, um, perception wise, let's say you take a child that grows up in the inner city in the projects, okay, versus a child that grows up in suburban life, versus a child that grows up in a palace or in a in a place of great wealth and royalty. Their perceptions on life is going to be totally different. And you know, yet they can be looking at the exact same thing. You know, they when if you put a road like a pathway, a picture of a pathway in front of them, that the child that grew up in the project saying this is my way out, whereas the second child says, hey, this is a way of growth and development, with that lives in the suburbs. But then that child of royalty, he's looking to see who's coming down that road to come and see them. You see, so it's three different perceptions of the same thing. But as we look at ourselves, we are to be able to identify hey, when I make this decision or I perceive this, what light am I perceiving this? What world am I perceiving this from? What part of my soul or what level is my soul perceiving? Or what am I learning? Am I being animalistic? Am I just dealing with the mineral aspect of me just, hey, I just want to satisfy my basic needs? Or do I want to, am I finding satisfaction from, reading a good book and gaining intelligence and knowledge, you know? So that's kind of where I'm at as far as the understanding where we're at so far.
So exactly on this idea. I want to just touch on one idea just to close out. I don't know if we read the whole thing, but I want to touch on the same book that we were learning for, or the same sefer we were learning for Purim. I just there's different aspects in it. It deals with different things, and I just want to, as we want to start preparing for Pesach, right? And we want to, have in our mind, of this new order, because Purim was an elevation, right? It was an elevation that we are at a higher level now than we were when we first started preparing for Purim. But that level is just to allow us to have almost a diving board for us to jump into the month of Nisan, right? And to transition out of a very difficult time of concealment into a time of light, right? And so the dynamic is that, right? The dynamic is that, and that's how we do it. She says, so I want to just touch a little bit on the story of Moses when this experience in the burning bush happened, right? Because that is, in essence, you could say this is the beginning of the Exodus, right? When Moses realizes his destiny, when he realizes what his purpose is, when he realizes why he was put into this world, this is the beginning of the Exodus. So let's read a little bit. We're not going to go through the whole section on this, but I do want to just touch on it for the sake of the thought. He says Moses declined the mission. When Moses turned aside to see this great sight, that the burning bush was not consumed, he heard a voice calling him, "Draw not thy knife hither." These words were to convey that the dignity to be conferred upon him, God intended for Moses personally, and not for his descendants. And further, he was warned not to um, aggregate honors appointed for others, as a priest, which was to belong to Aaron and his descendants, or royalty, which was supposed to be given to David in the house of David. Again, the voice spoke, "Take off your shoes from thy feet." And the places where he was standing, he said, "In the places where you're standing is a holy ground." These words conveyed the desire that God had cut. He says, "Cut asunder every bond uniting him with earthly concerns." So he's saying, like, when God is telling him, when God is telling Moshe to, when he says is to come closer, he's saying come closer to let him know that what he's saying specifically to him is only for him. It's not for him in conjunction for the priest and this whole thing. He has a special relationship with God. And so that's what they're explaining, that when God says, come closer, this is what he's speaking. And he says, and he tells Moses to take off of his shoes, because where he's standing is a holy place. It was to convey that he should surrender his connection to God, and unify him. He says, in elevating him past the earthly concerns. He was even to give up his conjugal rights. Eventually he's separated from his wife, right? He says, hereby the angel Michael spoke to God, O Lord of the world, can it be that thy purpose is to destroy mankind? Bless can prevail only if male and female are united. And yet the Moses is going to separate from his wife. God answered him, saying, Moses beget children, he has done his duty towards the world. And I desire him to unite himself with the Shekinah, that he may descend upon the earth for his sake. God God spake further, addressing Moses, and he says, thou shalt see only that what will happen in the near future, that Israel is to receive the Torah on Mount Sinai. But I behold that you come after and bow to the people will worship, and steer that the figure of which will be upon my chariot, even while my revelation will be made on Sinai. Thus they will be excited by my wrath, and nevertheless I know all of the perseverance of their hearts, whereby they will rebel against me in the desert. I will redeem them now, for I accord into man and treat what I and the entreatment he merits for his present honors, not what he will deserve in the future. I promise their father Jacob, I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will surely bring them out again. And now I will betake myself, to bring Israel in accordance to my word upon Jacob, and bear to them the land that I swore upon their fathers, and the seed that they should inherit. So I should have the time of affliction that I have appointed to upon the seed, and my revelation to Abraham, it was not to pass. And I've hearkened not to the supplications and the groanings of children of Israel. But now the end has come, and therefore go before Pharaoh, that he dismiss my people. If he does not bring about the redemption, none none of other will, for there is none other than that can do it. To wait, hold on. He says, if thou does not bring about the redemption, no other will, for there is no other that can do it. And the hope of Israel is upon thee, that Israel waits, and the matter of is in your hands alone. So just kind of like in closing, and again, we're going to be doing another class later on tonight at 20 o'clock, if you want to join, which is like around like 5 hours from now, 4 hours. Anyways, but we're going to continue on the leadership process. But I did want to say is this idea of dealing with the dynamic of that process of accepting our purpose, right? Of accepting that we have a unique mission. And the way that God talks to us is not like he talks to anybody else in Israel. Like he doesn't talk to the forefathers. He's talking to us specifically, right? And for us to connect to him, we have to bind the physical and the material, right? I mean, the spiritual and the material, right? And we have to bind those two things together to be unified. And so that's the idea of taking off the shoes, to be above just the earthly physical desires, right? And then from there, being able to understand that the mission that we have in this life, we're the only ones that can do it, right? And every single one of us has a unique mission, right? We have to accept that we have a unique mission. I understand how our society designs our thinking to make us think that we had success because we earned an income. That's the mineral level. That's the mineral level. America's operating at the mineral level. Sustain your needs and die. And they have a few neighborhoods where they have some people that they call rich. And those people that they call rich, you know what? What they're holding by the level of vegetation. No accomplishment. No accomplishment. And all those people in the vegetation and all the people in the mineral kingdom, you know what they do? They follow the people that have the power and the influence. So they worship Trump. These are the mineral people. This is the plant people. These people worship the Putins and the Trumps and the Netanyahus and the Kim Jong-uns, all the world leaders, the Bill Gates, the Michael Ovids, the Michael Eisners, all these. I don't know. I'm naming these people, the business people. But the point is just saying, they worship these people. They read their books. They pattern them lives like that. And all those people, you know who they all come back to? The men with the wisdom. The biggest military general is going to sit with the priest or the rabbi or the imam who's righteous, who does righteous works, who knows, who has wisdom. So the people who are on top of the world may not have the most money. It may actually be the people in the vegetation level or the people who are only operating on an animal level. Those may be the people that look like they have the most. But at the end of the day, the world is going to come back to us because the leaders of this world cannot operate without wisdom. And they know that because they're trying to elevate to that level. And this is what our job is. Our job is to help people elevate from one level of consciousness to the next. That you're not just luxury, you're not just living in Calabasas and you have a nicer car and it's faster and you could go to some nicer restaurants and these types of things and buy some clothes and hey, your life is better than the guy who lives in the other neighborhood. There's more than that. There's more than that. You can actually elevate higher than the luxury and become a person of influence who makes changes for the good, that helps people, that elevates from a position of influence. And then there's a level above that, which is the idea of being in a place of complete devekut, clinging to Hashem, knowledge and wisdom. And that's where we're at. That's our calling. Our calling is to be those people of wisdom, right? Those people of wisdom, those people of guidance, the people that the rich people could come to, the people of power, influence. And then from there, those people can be an example to the people in the vegetation and mineral kingdom. Any closing ideas, thoughts?
Yeah, Baruch, because that really brings everything to a different playing field, different leveling field. Because it's when you think about like Daniel and you think about Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar did not, those things he couldn't understand, and so he had Daniel, you got Joseph, and you got Pharaoh with all power and this wealth, but he still was dealing from an animalistic standpoint. But he has to go to Joseph, it wisdom and guidance. And so in this world, it's a lot of times we talk about this, and you're going to find there's a lot of people, especially online. And a couple of years back, there was a lot of a big major trend where you had like the preppers, you had people, trying to store up and different things like that, trying to, survivalists. But at the end of the day, you know, it really, the wealthy, the poor, one day gets brought to the same level, and the only thing that will cause someone to elevate or to move forward or progress in life is the relationship with Hashem. And unless you have the knowledge of how to accomplish that and being able to share that with others, that's going to be the most valuable thing on earth. The most valuable thing on earth is the knowledge of God, the knowledge of what the whole purpose of why we're here. Because when everything is brought down to the same level, uh, money, clothes, cars, all those things, different things like that, they become useless. Become useless. Yeah, that's all about.
So yeah, that's beautiful. That's the point. As it says, like, just transforming our desires, which is ultimately transforming our self-esteem, right? Because we live in a society that says, oh, well, you got to do this. You got to be in the vegetation kingdom. That's what we strive for. We strive to say, hey, man, I'm not just living off of this, this, blah, blah. I want to go out and make something in my life. Okay. And then he accomplished it. He made it out, right? That's what the language they use. He made it out. He made it out this bad environment. He made it out. She made it out. She made it out. Okay. So what does that mean? Vegetation level. They made it to wanting more than what the status quo was for them in their life. But like you said, that's it. It's beautiful. You brought the example of Yosef because it says clearly that the Pharaoh at the highest level, the Midrashim says the Pharaoh didn't speak Hebrew. He told Yosef not to tell anybody. Anyways, so we're back on 12 p.m. tonight. Obviously, normal time tomorrow as well, too, all the way to Friday. And we should just continue on, bro. That like God has given us this wisdom, like you said, like all of us. We're all here to be that source of light for the world and for our communities and specifically our families and ourselves.